play a game?
Why, yes, I believe we shall.
Oh, I got a live one here.
Getting geeky all up in your podcast. It's Shane Plays Geek Talk, a journey into the things we love. I'm your host, Shane Stacks. Thanks so much for pressing play. As listeners of this podcast will know, two of the pillars of things that I talk about on this show, among many other things, but a couple of the central pillars are role-playing games, tabletop role-playing games, and comic books. And today's guest, at least one of the works that he's known for, combines both of those loves of mine. So we'll touch on that, but there's other stuff that he's done as well over his history. And my guest is author, game designer, editor, game master. I was in one of his games at North Texas RPG Con. Steve Winter, a TSR veteran, and also Wizards of the Coast veteran as well. So, Steve, welcome to Shane Plays.
Well, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, I'm really, really excited to have you. Is there anything else you'd like to add to your introduction there that you might want people to know about you?
No, that pretty much covers it.
Okay. So the fact that you're secretly a polymorphed alien studying humanity on behalf of the planet Baltegus 5.
Yeah, that's never been confirmed.
Never confirmed nor denied. Okay. So I got to ask you, I was going to lead with Shadowdark because I was going to say we're going to start in media res and talk about the Shadowdark game you ran at North Texas RPG Con, and then talk about your game career, other things in flashbacks. But I want to give you the opportunity. I see, looks like 2 guitars and possibly a miniature guitar or a ukulele on 4. I see 5 guitars now that I'm looking. So tell us about your guitars.
Well, so I started playing guitar when I was probably 12 years old, somewhere right around there. I think I was in 6th grade. And
did you got your first set of six strings and played it till your fingers bled?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Pretty much.
All right.
I played all through. That was in the, that would have been in the very early 1970s when I took it up, and I played until I got out of college. And I played a lot, and then, you get a job, you start a career, you start a family, other things take priority. And I wound up just putting my guitar away, sat in the storage room for like 35 years. And then at some point, one of my 2 sons was taking a guitar, very casual kind of guitar lessons at school. It was sort of a lunchtime program or something. And so he was curious. He knew I had a guitar in the storeroom, and he asked if he could, if we could take a look at it. Well, it was an electric guitar, and it had deteriorated while it was sitting in storage. The wiring was all shot. So he wasn't able to play it. But
what kind of guitar was it? Do you remember?
Was a 1974 Les Paul Deluxe, which I still have. At this point, it's worth more than my car. So
wow!
I don't play that guitar much. I should at some point just sell it because, like I say, I don't even like it all that much anymore, other than the fact that it's the guitar I played while I was in college.
Right. Yeah.
It has a lot of sentimental value to me, but it doesn't have anything,
right.
I should just sell it and get it into the hands of somebody else who's going to play it. Anyway.
Who would just lovingly caress it.
At some point, probably 6-7 years ago, I decided, you know what? I feel like playing guitar again. And I took that guitar to a shop, had it all put back in shape, and started playing it. And I was astounded. Mentally, I remembered almost nothing about playing guitar, but my fingers remembered how to do things.
Muscle memory is a real thing.
Yeah. I mean, and especially those things you learn when you're a kid, when you're a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that is just cemented in your brain. I couldn't remember the names of any of the things I was doing, but I could actually still play some songs. And so I took it up again, and as you can see, it's gotten out of control.
Yeah, I see at least 5 guitar necks.
Yeah.
So is that kind of there's one to your right that is kind of brown, a couple of different. Yeah, that one right there. Is that a miniature guitar or what?
No,
what is that? Because
it's just the weird foreshortening of the laptop camera that's making it look small.
Looks small.
Yeah, it's about the same size as the Telecaster. It's just this weird
it just looks okay. So that's cool. Yeah, I love stuff like that because a lot of people think, the only just naturally assume that Steve Winter, all he does is play games. I love people to flesh out the other stuff that they're into. So well, that's cool. So now, did your son stick with it too? Do y'all get to play together or
no? He took those lessons because they were being given by a teacher that he really liked.
Got it.
And that lasted. It was like 2 months or something. He learned a few very basic things, but no, he moved on to other things.
So when you took that last question on the guitars, when you took that Les Paul in to get worked on, was the guy like, do you realize what you have here? Or was he impressed with it?
I knew.
Yeah. But was he like, wow, I don't see a lot of these come through. Yeah.
I took it to a guy here in Seattle who is one of the best guitar techs in the area. And they were, he and the other people in the shop, anytime something like that comes in, but they see a lot of vintage guitars in that shop, right? Because all the best musicians in the area go there. I am certainly not one of the best musicians. I am not even remotely in that class. But I asked my musician friends, and they all said, "Oh, if you want to take a vintage instrument somewhere and know it's going to be treated right, this is the place."
That's the place. Yeah. Well, cool. All right. Well, thanks for sharing about your guitars. Playing that 6-string till your fingers bled, building up them calluses. Yeah. How long did it take you to build your calluses back up when you started again?
I don't know, a couple of weeks. It wasn't too bad. And I play, 95% of my playing is on electric guitars, and they are way easier on.
Yeah, the strings are a lot. Yeah, right. The strings are. Yeah. So right. Yeah, you don't have to. I got you.
Although I did it a couple of years ago, I put a picture up on Facebook of my hand with blisters on both of these fingers because I'd been practicing something. I don't remember what it was. And it was something that really put a lot of stress on those 2 fingers. And, I hadn't had literal blisters on my fingertips for a long, long time.
Long time. That's cool. Well, not cool that you got blisters, but cool that you just dove back into an old passion.
Yeah.
So, all right. Speaking of passions, I'm assuming since you go to North Texas RPG Con, I'm assuming you go to other gaming conventions. I could be wrong, but I'm assuming gaming is one of your passions, or at least used to be at some point.
Yeah. So, I do a lot of gaming.
So I'm going to segue. I'm going to use that to segue us into my original planned introduction. So we'll start in media res and then work our way backwards. So in June, I happened to be looking through, I signed up for North Texas RPG Con, and North Texas RPG Con is a great convention if people have never been. A lot of people describe it almost like a family reunion, and I think that there's a lot of truth to that. Mm-hmm. They purposefully keep it. I think this year they bumped it up to 600 pre-sales. In years before, they've kept it to 500. Maybe they went to 650. I can't remember. But there's a lot of interesting.
Still didn't feel crowded at all.
Right, not at all. Yeah. So, and they do that purposefully, which I appreciate. So it's anybody can sign up. They can walk up while the con's going on and sign up and play, but pre-sales of tickets are limited to, whatever, 600, we'll say. But anyway, the point is, I was looking through, I was like, Shadowdark, I was looking through listings, like, oh, here's Shadowdark, and I've been wanting to try out Shadowdark. Everyone keeps giving it really good word of mouth. And then I was like, oh, and Steve Winter is running it. And I haven't had a chance to meet Steve Winter yet, because yourself and other veterans of the RPG gaming industry are often at North Texas RPG Con. So I was like, oh, I'll knock out two birds with one stone. And I really enjoyed both your personality. You were just a genuine, friendly guy. And I enjoyed the game. I enjoyed the scenario, and I enjoyed Shadowdark. So
I think you were in the group that succeeded, right?
No, it went horribly wrong.
You were in the group where everyone died. Okay.
Yeah, we threw the stuff in the water, but we threw it in the wrong water. So we kind of had the right idea. When they were doing that, there was like an underground lake, and I was like, I don't think that's the right solution, but whatever.
No, you guys did everything right until
except
right
the one thing,
you decided to cut some corners and just throw it in the water that was right there.
Just throw it in there. Yeah, throw it right there. And you'd given us a big hint at the beginning with the festival and the celebration.
Well, and that same argument occurred in the second group as well. There were people saying, well, this has got to be connected to the river. We can just throw it right here. But they were argued down. And so.
Well, good. So, and I have to say, I really enjoyed your scenario. And I don't mind if everything ends in a big fiery, apocalyptic, but it's a con game, right? Mm-hmm. Of course, I want to succeed, if possible. But if it ends in a TPK, one that I'm an old school player, I don't necessarily hate a TPK, especially in a one shot. But it's a con game. We're just there to have fun. So whatever. If you win the scenario, bonus, right? But the important thing is let's have fun. And I felt like we had fun. So, and we almost solved it. So, and it was a good scenario, by the way. Did you write that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a good scenario. Yeah. So,
heavily influenced by the story, The Doom That Came to Sarnath by Lovecraft.
Right. Right. But adapted to a faux medieval, most fantasy settings are faux medieval, right? So a faux medieval, dark fantasy, whatever, Shadowdark feels a little grimdark to me. So why did you run Shadowdark? I want, from your perspective as a game designer, a veteran, what is it about Shadowdark that appeals to you? Or doesn't? Maybe you could critique it if you want.
Well, no, I am a big fan of Shadowdark at this point. For pretty much ever since 1981, when the Moldvay and Cook version of D&D came out, that has been my favorite version of D&D.
Okay.
And, in 40 plus years, nothing had dethroned it. Not that I didn't play and enjoy lots of other games, but I just thought.
But it was your favorite.
Yeah, that was my favorite approach. I just really liked the elegance of that game. And Shadowdark.
Now, are we talking about the elegance like everything is D6 damage? Like, what do you mean by elegance?
I mean that the game there's an intuitiveness about the game that just works really well. Okay. And it has a very minimalist kind of approach to a lot of things. You look at, for example, there are things in that version of the game that didn't make it into the wider world of D&D for years, right? Things like standard modifiers for your ability scores, right? Where every ability score, the modifiers are the same based on what the number is. It wasn't until third edition where that came into the main standard of D&D. There's just a lot of things like that it has very simple, straightforward systems for everything it covers, and everything it doesn't cover is just up to the DM. And
up to the DM.
That's the kind of decision making, for the most part, that a DM should be doing. So Shadowdark has a lot of that same kind of approach. It's a very minimalist game. It tells you what you need to know, and it leaves everything else up to the players and the GM. I mean, there are tons of OSR games out there, old school games, that are essentially just rewrites of Mold, Vey, and Cook. And every time another one comes out, my reaction is, really? Do we need another rewrite of Mold, Vey, and Cook? Especially when you can go to Drive-Thru RPG and still get the Mold, Vey, Cook books.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I've got them, through PDF on Drive-Thru, and I've got original books of it. You could still get original books, especially at a place like NTX, fairly cheap.
Yeah. I mean, that so many of those were sold. There's still tons of the originals around. But Shadowdark does some things better even than Mold, Vey, Cook. Kelsey Dion made some changes. I have said that Shadowdark is like a masterclass in how to get rid of everything you don't need in a game design, because it plays so quickly and smoothly, and for running at conventions, that's exactly what you want. So, but at this point, my group and I wrapped up about a 5e campaign that had lasted about 6 years. And at this point, we're pretty much all in agreement that that's probably the last 5e we will ever play, and that we'll be switching to Shadowdark from this point on.
Yeah, and that's fair. I think I'm kind of in the same boat when it comes to 5e. I started running a campaign of 5e at a game store. And of course, they're selling 5e at the time, right? This was like 10 years ago. So, of course, I'm going to run 5e to help them sell whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that for several years. And then COVID took that game store. I think there were some other factors, but I think the owner was finally like, okay, time to pack it in. And so we moved it to a personal game, not running for show, but we just stayed on 5e because that's what we were on. And I just wrapped that about a month or two ago. And I told everybody that, there's so many other games out there that I want to play that I never get a chance to play, including like board game. I noticed you have a lot of war game history. You used to run, I guess a war game event at Gen Con, if I read right and stuff. So, I mean, I like war games. I like board games. There's so many RPGs out there that I want to try, like Shadowdark, so I'm shifting over to like a once a month game day. Like on Saturday, we're all going to get together and we may play a board game. We may do a one shot of some, but 5e is probably on the shelf for, until so much time has gone by that 5e feels nostalgic. And I'm like, hey, let's see what 5e is like. Bring my cane.
Yeah. So, and don't get me wrong, I like 5e. I think it's a very good game, but it's but I think Shadowdark is better for my taste.
Streamlined.
I want to run these days.
Yeah, it was. I mean, there's a lot of nice mechanics in Shadowdark. I'm like you. I'm not against 5e. I think 5e did a lot right. I can critique a lot of it, but we had a good time using 5e for years. And, 5e also happened to be the D&D system in place when RPGs exploded again. So, and then, you could argue that they're even more popular now than they ever have been. So, potentially. So in the mainstream. I'm not against 5e, but I enjoyed playing Shadowdark. I'm looking forward to playing some different stuff. So, one of the things I really liked about Shadowdark, that it's like that light source thing. I love the light source that adds such a sense of like, this is serious. Like, we're really dungeon crawling here, and, they've even got little timer apps out there and stuff. If people don't know, in Shadowdark, if you let your life source go out, that's a horribly bad thing. And like, it's tracked in, like, a torch is good for an hour of real time, not game time. Like, so if you sit there and you discuss the crazy plan to attack the monster that's going to fall apart in the first round anyway, and you discuss that for 20 minutes, you've wasted 20 minutes of your torch. So I think I really like that mechanic a lot.
Yep. Although, and by the other side of that coin is that if you reach a point in your exploration of the dungeon and then everybody says, you know what, we're going to turn around and go back to the surface. And even though the surface, it might be 5 miles away. It might take, if you were actually tracking the time, it might take 5 hours of scrambling through caves and tunnels and dungeon chambers to get back to the surface. But if you don't have any random encounters along the way, if you can get there in 10 minutes of game time, you did it on one torch, right? And now there are options to burn the torch faster than that, but it's just a very simple mechanic. Although honestly, to me, everybody makes a big deal out of the torch timer thing. I think because it's a really easy rule to latch onto, and I think it's a great rule. It's not like it's unique to Shadowdark. People were doing that decades ago. But there are other things in Shadowdark that I think are way more impactful and insightful than the.
Well, like, do you have any examples immediately to mind?
Oh, sure. I mean, I think the number one best thing the game did was your con bonus on hit points applies only at first level. After that, it's just a straight die roll, which means that, a fighter is a fifth level fighter is still probably going to have twice as many hit points as a wizard, but he's not going to have 3 or 4 times as many hit points as a wizard, right? So that right there kind of simplifies things for the GM, because the wizard is not anywhere near as much more fragile than everyone else is. And the other thing it does on the same kind of token is that your ability bonuses, strength and dexterity, they apply to attack rolls, but not to damage rolls. Damage rolls are generally just a straight die roll. And so it keeps all the numbers in the game a bit smaller, and it's kind of weird how this works, but psychologically, I think it's absolutely true. It just makes the game feel a lot more desperate, right?
It does.
If you only have 15 hit points, then things that are doing a D6 damage, they're kind of scary. They can kill you in a couple of rounds.
And that's what I meant. I'm not sure if grimdark is the exact right adjective for Shadowdark.
I wouldn't call it grimdark, but I would call it gritty. It is a gritty game.
It's gritty. It does feel like that sense of danger is heightened, like it was, back in the day when, we jokingly didn't even give our characters names till 3rd level, kind of thing.
Right.
So
yeah, you don't want to get emotionally attached.
Right. And then they did either that or, your first level fighter would die, and your first level fighter, Zyrtec, the Mighty. And then I love naming characters after medicine. It's just easy, just randomly look up a medicine name on the internet, and that's the name of your character, especially mages. But so Zyrtec the Mighty dies, and everyone's like, well, his son shows up to avenge him. So it's Zyrtec 2 with the same stats and all that. Yeah, he's here to avenge his dad.
I will avenge you, Father.
Yeah, and then he dies, and then Zyrtec the 3rd. But anyway.
But it took 2 to 5 minutes to come up with that new character, and that's another thing that Shadowdark does really well.
Right.
You don't feel bad as a GM about killing characters when they can just roll up, in
right.
3 minutes they can be back in the game.
It's that sensibility from back in the day, whereas now, and again, it's there's nothing. It says the customer is always right. Well, the full quote is the customer is always right in matters of taste, right? So if somebody wants to play a game where they spend 8 hours developing this backstory for this special blossoming flower of a character, and that sounds dismissive. I kind of mean it that way, but not really. It's their thing. That's fine, but that's not what I'm there for. I'm not there. I'm there to game, to have fun, to dungeon crawl. I'm not using. There's people that are using role playing on levels that I never even conceived of when I was growing up, and how they're engaging with it, and whatever issues maybe they're working through. I've heard people, they're using it that way, but that's just that wasn't how I came to gaming. So that's not my style. So if I'm DMing a game and, my player is like, hey, here's my, War and Peace level backstory. Okay, dude, but you might die, tonight, so it's a different.
Yeah, it's some of that kind of lapses into, hey, it's not on me to tell you how to have fun, right?
Right.
It's kind of, I think to a lot of players, generating all that backstory is just part of the fun. It's like when you're a GM and you're designing a dungeon and you create an immense history for this location that the players are never going to discover, and that it really doesn't affect anything, right? It's just a fun mental exercise. It does become a problem when that investment in the character comes with an expectation that now this character is going to be, wrapped in cotton and never harmed. Because they're the hero of the story, right? And so no matter how stupid I act, I'm always going to come through the other end smelling like a rose. Because that's not how stories work.
Right.
So, but yeah, I much more prefer the style of play where I'm writing my character's history in the course of play. What happened before he became an adventurer? It's the old, what was the movie, Gumball Rally, right? With whatever is behind me doesn't matter, right? Whatever happened before they became an adventurer is, they didn't do anything of note back then, right? He was a pig farmer. He was a fisherman.
Right. He's a zero level.
I have written about this before. If you think about the life of an adventurer, part of what's happened in role-playing games is that the idea of being an adventurer has become equated with the idea of being a glorious hero. That there is something wonderful and thrilling about being an adventurer. If you think about this in real terms, nobody gives up a comfortable, satisfying life to go sleep in the rain and eat spoiled rations and risk their life fighting hideous monsters for a handful of gold coins, unless where they were coming from was even worse.
Right. Yeah. It's the only way to bootstrap up the.
They came from a farming village where there was regular drought and hunger, or where
on a good day they got 2 mud pies.
Yeah. The local baron was just a real SOB, whatever it might be. They came from a rotten background if they went into a desperate line of work like being an adventurer.
Yeah, and you're right, because adventuring just means you live an adventurous life. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're a hero. Like, it made me think of, Jack Vance and Kugel the Clever, if you've ever read any of those stories. Kugel is not a hero, but he's an adventurer. He gets out there and adventures, but he's no hero by any means. So he's just, always poking the bear almost out of boredom. But yeah, like I said, I'm not against, but to take it back to what you were saying, a deep backstory doesn't equal plot armor. Right. And I think that some characters think it, or some players think it should, but it's just it's almost wonderful, even though I don't get into all the reasons people play RPG. I mean, I've seen a lot of interesting takes on tabletop role-playing games, from therapeutic to this to that. I mean, there's a lot of really deep stuff going on. Some people play role-playing games because they want to learn to be more culturally sensitive about another culture. I mean, they're using it in ways that I never thought of. And even though I don't get it, it's kind of wonderful because each generation is iterating it in a way that we didn't foresee, right? And so crazy stuff is coming out that I'm like, oh, I never even would have thought of that. So, but for me, I just want to dungeon crawl and or spaceship crawl or whatever, and because that's just the mold I came out of. So, are there any other games? I mean, Shadowdark, I have to say, I was very impressed with the mechanics, the feel of it, the design of it. I went and bought while we were playing, we took a break and I ran over to Black Blade Publishing and bought the Shadowdark stuff and then came back to the game. So I definitely want to play some more. Are there any other games that you're playing or are impressed with right now?
Well, I mean, there's a fair amount. Down at North Texas, I picked up a copy of Knave.
Knave. Okay. I'm not familiar. Was that the guy that was sitting at the booth kind of, and it was like build your own character or something? Or am I thinking?
No, I got this at Black Blade as well. I got it from Alan. And I've had the PDF of this for years. I just wanted to get a hard copy of it. And it's a very, it's quite different from Shadowdark, but it definitely has an old school feel. And it was done by Ben Milton. He also did Maze Rats. And it has just wonderful random tables in it. A lot of the game is set up.
I love random tables.
Yeah, the game is set up to be driven by random tables. I mean, there are even there's an assortment of magic spells that come pre-written in the game, but then the assumption is that magic is weird and unpredictable, and so when you find scrolls and spell books and things, there's just a series of tables that you roll on to generate what this spell is, right? And so you can wind up with all kinds of weird effects and combinations of spells that have never occurred in RPGs before.
That's great.
Just you roll some dice, and then the player and the GM kind of hash out what that spell does, right? You're going to get something like, gaseous fingers, or something like that.
Some weird.
What is this spell?
I love it. Yeah, I think magic is best when it is a little scary and intimidating. Like, it's not tame, right? Like, as much as I love D&D and the magic system, like, I cast magic missile or I cast this or that, I think we've gotten a little bit too used to magic. Like, we've forgotten what it was like to read, an old fantasy book for the first time as a kid and be like, wow, just really blown away by what magic is.
Yeah.
Did you see a movie called Bright?
Yes. Yeah. Well, it was on Netflix. Yeah, I've seen that.
Right. So in that, there was a magic wand, and it turned the entire community upside down when this magic wand showed up. Mm-hmm. And it was both desirable for the power it possessed, but also feared almost like it was a nuclear bomb, right? This was a serious, this wasn't a casual, I'm just going to pick this, I'm going to attune to this wand and cast it and see what it does. I mean, it was like, this was a major thing, right? Because magic in and of itself, is like, it like overturns the laws of physics and reality and lets you cheat reality. So anyway, the point you were talking about Knave and the crazy magic system and all that, and I interrupted you. Sorry about that.
No. I mean, I would add to what you were just saying that RPGs, and this pretty much, I mean, there are a handful of exceptions, things like Ars Magica and things, but RPGs tend to treat magic like technology, right?
Right.
You flip an on switch and it does exactly what you expect every time until you flip the switch off and then it turns off, right? And that's a very weird and 21st century view of magic. That's certainly not the way it was seen in the Middle Ages or in the classical world. But as to other games that I play and enjoy, I have two other gaming groups other than my D&D group right now is after we wrapped up the 5e campaign. Now we're playing some Blades in the Dark because my older son is also in that group, and he's a huge fan of Blades in the Dark. So
I keep hearing that's another game that I keep hearing really good stuff about, and I've never had the chance to play.
It's a very interesting game. We're still getting used to it. If you are steeped in, decades of playing D&D, Blades in the Dark is a big adjustment. It's a very different style of playing, and we're all still kind of groping our way through it. It's definitely fun. We're enjoying it, and as we figure out how it's actually supposed to work, obviously we're enjoying it more. So that's one that we're playing now. I'm in a group that plays Savage Worlds. I've been with that group for over a decade. Currently, I'm running a science fiction game that's very close to Traveller, except we're using Savage Worlds for the rules.
Savage Worlds.
Yeah.
I mean, I've watched a lot of Savage Worlds. I like the exploding dice of Savage Worlds a lot. And I like the multi-genre system of it. I haven't played it. I think I have played in one or two sessions of it, but I haven't played a lot of it. There for a while, a lot of people were talking about Savage Worlds a lot, and I haven't heard much about it in the last.
Yeah, I mean, it had a real moment in the sun 10 or so years ago where it was kind of the new hotness and everybody was talking about it. And now it's just one of those workhorse games that does what it's supposed to do. Right. Lots of people still play it. I mean, I really like it. I think it's a fantastic system, especially for games in a setting that uses firearms. I think Savage Worlds works really well. It far better than a D&D style of
so
game.
Like what, quick and lethal, or what is it that you think that it does well with?
It can be lethal, but it isn't necessarily. And I think that's kind of why it works well for firearms, because the combat, the wounding system in Savage Worlds is not attrition based the way D&D is, right? Where you're just chipping away hit points until somebody finally falls down. Savage Worlds deals with it more in you have a lot of opportunities to, even if you get hit, somebody shoots at you, you get hit, you have something called bennies that basically allow you to re-roll and make saving rolls and things like that. So as long as you still have bennies, you can survive, right? And it's all done in story where it's like, well, okay, I'm going to use this benny. They should have done a pretty severe wound to me there, but I'm going to use this benny, and I managed to escape that. So
the Bible that your grandmother gave you that you
the bullet hit the Bible, or I got my back to the pillar right before I took the shot, or whatever it might be. So you have a lot of story armor in that regard. But once the bennies are gone, you're in deep trouble at that point, because if you get shot, odds are you're going down.
So you're in 3 different gaming groups. That's pretty cool.
And the third one. Cool. The third one is mostly Call of Cthulhu and other horror type games. We do a lot of Call of Cthulhu. We just recently did some Brindlewood Bay. I enjoyed that. I ran a game called Cthulhu Dark, which is a super simple.
I mean, Cthulhu's already dark. So, I mean, what was dark? What was particularly dark about this?
So Cthulhu Dark is it's supposedly based on Blades in the Dark. That's why it's called Dark.
Okay, gotcha.
But it takes the Blades in the Dark. One thing I would say about it is that it is, if you talk to people who enjoy Blades in the Dark, for some reason they all have the idea that it's a very simple and fast playing game. But it's not. It's actually a pretty rules heavy game. None of the individual systems involved are very difficult, but there are a lot of them. And Cthulhu Dark strips all of that away. The rules of Cthulhu Dark are like one page.
So it's basically just go ahead and go insane, and end of story.
Yes, the only there is one die rolling mechanic in the game, which is you're rolling d6. If it's something that humans can normally do, you get a d6 to try it. If you have training in doing it, you get 2 d6s. If you're willing to put your sanity on the line, you get 3 d6s. And if any of those dice come up a 4 or higher, you succeed. But if anytime you roll a 6, your sanity is at risk. And that basically is the game. You now know how to play Cthulhu.
That's how it works.
Yeah,
that's cool. Yeah,
and so for simple one-shot Cthulhu games, we all agreed, and most of the people in that Cthulhu group are former TSR employees. So these are all people who are
that's fun.
Steeped in game design and how RPGs work. And everybody in the group agreed, there's very little to this game, but it actually works really well. And there's a lot of tension in it because of the way the insanity rules work.
Nice.
So
I don't want to assign a opinion to you that doesn't exist, but I feel like I'm hearing a trend. It's as interesting to me because you do have history in game design and editing about get rid of crap out of the game. So do you feel that that's almost always the way to go? Like, is there ever a time when it's okay to put in crunch?
I do now. Years ago, back in the 80s and 90s, a game really couldn't be too complicated for my taste.
That's kind of how I was. I've changed a little bit. I still don't mind crunch at all. Mm-hmm. But used to, if it wasn't crunchy, I was kind of like, what's going on here? Where's my crunch?
Yeah. Right. No, a game like Cthulhu Dark, I would have sneered at when I was 25. But now I absolutely love it.
What's this decaf game you're trying to put in front of me?
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, one other question, and then I'll move over into your career in games, because we've already had quite a good discussion just on what you're playing right now. Can you think of the most spectacular Cthulhu loss of sanity moment in a Cthulhu game? Do you have one that comes to mind?
Well, there's my favorite little anecdote from our Cthulhu campaigns. This was quite a few years ago. Charles Ryan was running the game, I believe. Charles now works for Monty Cook Games. He had been, but we were all working at Wizards of the Coast at the time. And another good friend, Dale Donovan, who had been the editor of Dragon Magazine for a while, and he had moved out to Seattle when Wizards bought the company. And he and his family were moving back to the Midwest, so he was going to be leaving the game. And we were playing, I forget the name of the adventure, but it's an adventure about the Wendigo. So it's set up in the Canadian wilderness, and my character had been infected by the Migo and was completely insane. Right? Nobody else knew this. Only I knew that my character was my character was no longer my character. My character was an insane cannibal. And I managed, I kind of worked this out with Charles because we knew it was going to be Dale's last session, and we kind of wanted something big to happen with Dale. And I managed to work it so that our nighttime sentry schedule had Dale's character coming on guard duty right after mine. And so my character woke up Dale, told him, I heard a noise down by the river. Come down. It's not really time for you to go on guard duty yet, but come down by the river with me.
Yeah.
Two characters go down by the river, smashed his character over the head with a rock, ate him.
Yes.
And then threw all the remains in the river so they would...
All in the name of friendship.
Right. And then just went back to camp, went to sleep. The next morning, everybody else wakes up and they're like, wait, what happened to Dale's character?
I don't know. I woke him up for his
I don't know.
shift.
I woke him up when my shift was done. Something must have happened. And then
why are you covered in blood? I have no idea.
So yes, that was my crowning moment in a Call of Cthulhu game when I got to kill and eat another player character.
Another character. That's great. Like I said, because you just wanted to make sure your friend had a nice send-off.
Yes, that something really magnificent happened to take his character out of the game.
It was the best Cthulhu moment I've ever heard it, and I wasn't here to witness this. I heard about it secondhand, but evidently it was set in the 30s or 40s. One of those kind of Cthulhu games, and they were up on top of like a skyscraper, and they saw the dread whatever. I mean, I don't know if it's Cthulhu, whatever it was, the dread whatever. Mm-hmm. And the guy popped a pin on a grenade, stuck it in his mouth, and jumped off the skyscraper. So I always thought that was a pretty good way to go out. He just took one look and went, tunk, popped the pin, stuck it in the mouth, and over the side he went. So, so
you got to make sure that the fall might not do it.
Yeah, you got it. That grenade will, though. I'm going to go out as spectacularly crazy as possible. Okay, so shifting gears, let's talk a little bit about your history in games. And I was going to ask, are you retired now? Did you start a second career? Like, okay.
No, I mean, I retired a year ago, February, and my idea at the time was that now I'm going to be free to work on all those projects that I've been keeping notes about and thinking about for decades, but I could never get any publisher interested in. But the reality has been that for the last year and a half, I've just kind of been screwing around.
Be quite honest about it. No, I mean,
and I don't feel a shred of guilt about it. So,
well, good for you. I respect that.
Although it took a while to get to the point of not feeling guilty.
Well, how dare you enjoy your retirement?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't believe. How dare you even suggest?
I still have all those plans, and I'm kind of getting to the point where I feel like, I should have some purpose in my life again, other than just, finishing Skyrim.
Right.
Things like that.
Are you playing like what? Sounds like you play Skyrim. What? And I know your mutual ex-coworker Zeb Cook just retired not that long ago from.
He
Cinemax,
retired.
If I remember right.
Just a little bit before I did. He retired.
Yeah.
Yep. And he lives out here now. He moved. He had been in Baltimore, and now he's He's not here in Seattle. He's on the other side of Puget Sound on the Olympic Peninsula.
I interviewed him a year or two ago, and it turned out that he was working. I don't know if he was directly on Skyrim, but he was.
No, he was working on Elder Scrolls Online.
That's what it was. Yeah, and then but he retired. So,
but another TSR veteran, Bruce Nesmith, was the lead system designer on Skyrim. So Bruce his background was as a mathematician, and he was the one who worked out all the formulas and equations for how the game itself functions.
Skyrim has been a ridiculously successful game.
Yes.
I mean, I've literally met people who've said the only game I need and will ever need is Skyrim. So they're not gamers. They're Skyrim players. They're not gamers. They're Skyrim players.
No, and so, I played Skyrim like to completion, and then I play some other game, and then I play Skyrim again.
You always end up going back to Skyrim.
And then I play some other game, and then I play Skyrim again. I know that terrain so well. I can navigate.
It's a well done game. I mean, it's ridiculously. It's
amazing.
That's one of those games you could bring the same team back together, and there's no guarantee that some games are just they're a moment in time. I mean, I'm not saying that the same team wouldn't put out another great game, but there's no guarantee they would put out something with the success of Skyrim. That game it's
hard to say what the magic what the magic was of that, but because like you say, it's not just a moment in time, right? At that time, Skyrim was kind of revelatory, right?
Right.
And there were tons of reviewers out there saying, this is what we've been saying for years. Give us a genuine open world game, and people will devour it. Right.
And they have.
Yeah.
My biggest praise to Skyrim. Now, I've played it a lot. I've pumped some hours into Skyrim, but probably nowhere near as much as you or a lot of other people have. My biggest praise for Skyrim is you can end up off in DLC and have no idea that you're not on the main quest. Everything feels important, right? Yeah. You have no idea that you've departed off, quote unquote, the main storyline. Everything feels like it's important and rewarding and just as polished and meaty as the quote unquote real story. So I will definitely give them much praise for that.
And you can play the game. You can play the game for hours and hours and hours and never even touch the main quests.
Right. Right.
Just explore and kill things and figure out how alchemy works.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a super well done game. I've got to give them a lot of credit. And then have you played another game? I think is especially for capturing D&D. I agree with the praise out there for Baldur's Gate 3. Have you put any time into that?
I have not played Baldur's Gate 3 because I'm at the point right now where because Windows 10 is being sunsetted later this year, my computer wouldn't handle Baldur's Gate 3. So, although I need to take a look, because if I do have a subscription to GeForce Now, if Baldur's Gate runs on GeForce Now, then I could play it.
I had to play it. Well, it's a ridiculously. It's not open world like Skyrim, right? Mm-hmm. There are specific storylines and quests you can go off, but
I understand it's extremely open ended. So
it is open ended. There's I guess endings that people still haven't discovered. Mm-hmm. That's it for adapting to your particular style of play, and being incredibly polished and giving you 80 million ways to solve any encounter, right? You can combat it. You can do this. You can do that. You can go speak to an animal. You can read somebody's thoughts. You can cast Mage Hand and send it through a little hole into another room to pull a lever, stuff like that. It's incredibly good at making you feel like whatever choice you made was the way you were supposed to do it, even though there's like 30 different ways to do it. It's in it, the voice acting's great and all of that. So
and
super well done.
To once again tie it back to TSR, Lawrence Schick, who I worked with at TSR in 1981 when I first went there, he was one of the lead designers or lead story designers. I'm not sure exactly what his role was on Baldur's Gate 3. So,
wow.
That's Lawrence Schick of White Plume Mountain.
Right, sure. So, yeah. Didn't he also write one of the first books documenting all the RPGs out there? Was that Lawrence Schick?
Yeah. What was that called?
I can't remember the name of it off the top of my
Heroic
head.
Worlds, I think.
Yeah, a lot of people refer to it, and it shows up in a lot of bibliographies and footnotes and whatnot. Okay, so to kind of tie this into your history, I wasn't going to lead on your career with this, but since we're talking about CRPGs, one of the things that researching for this discussion today is I learned that I guess along with Jim Ward, David Cook, and Mike Brault, am I saying that right?
Bro,
even though at LT it's Bro, says you co-wrote the adventure scenario that was adapted into the game Pool of Radiance, which for me, Pool of Radiance not only is one of my, it blew me away. I was like, I can play D&D on the computer without needing a DM and a group of people, and it's using the rules, and it feels like D&D, and my brain exploded. But it's also incredibly important for the history of computer role-playing games, right? Mm-hmm. It kicked off the gold box from SSI when it did. So did you know when you were writing the adventure scenario that you were writing it for a computer game? Like, tell me a little bit about how that happened.
Oh, yeah. It was all, that was all done in cooperation with SSI. I actually did a fair amount of work on that game that unfortunately did not make it into the computer game.
Oh, really? Hey, what was it? So you came up with Tyrant Thrax's not evil twin, but good twin, and he was a good twin because he didn't have a goatee.
Well, what I did, as the game was originally envisioned, it was going to use, and I think it ultimately did use, these geomorphic map sections for the city, and but as they were originally going to be, they were supposed to be 32 by 32 squares. And I forget how many of them they needed. And I drew all those 32 by 32 map squares.
Oh, really?
So that was a lot of mapping.
So you didn't just write a, what do we call it, treatment for what the story would be. You were helping develop details of the game. Yes, we were helping to actually design the computer game. And then we took that work and turned it into the paper product that came out as Radiance. So how much of what you did? Oh, go ahead.
Well, so I did all those maps, 32 by 32 maps. And I forget how many of them there were, but it was a bunch. And it was a lot of work. And then the SSI came back and said, yeah, you know what? That is way... computers can't handle that. It's too much memory to deal with those 32 by 32 map sections. We need to reduce those to, I think it was like 12 by 12. So, if it had been 16 by 16, then I could have just taken everything I'd done and cut it in half. But 32 does not divide evenly by 12. So basically, all those maps had to be completely redone from scratch, which essentially meant I did the work twice. And even then, they didn't all make it in.
But some of your maps did. Some of your maps. Okay, I didn't realize that the TSR team.
Other things. There was, I think, the only actual part of the adventure. I think I did like a bunch of NPCs and things like that. The only piece of the adventure that I can remember designing was there's a well in the town that you go down. Mm-hmm. You go down through the well, and there's a goblin lair down there. I designed. Yeah,
there's also some bandits down there. I think it's very well. Yeah.
I did that.
Wow.
But I think that was the only piece of actual adventure that I wrote for.
Okay, because see, I literally thought when it said, "Oh, the adventure scenario," I thought I assumed in my mind that the four of y'all got together, banged out like a 2 or 3 page, like like Hollywood would call it a treatment, right?
Yeah. Well,
hey, here's kind of yeah. But you also did other stuff.
We did a lot more than that.
Yeah, that's wow. So
fact,
did you?
We did enough writing on that I'm not sure if this is still the case, but for many years, IMDb included computer game writers. You got an entry on IMDb for writing computer game story and dialogue. And so, yeah, I had an IMDb entry for many years because of Pool of Radiance.
Pool of Radiance. Well, that's really cool.
I'm not sure if that's still the case. I haven't looked at IMDb for years. So
a long time.
Yeah.
Huh. Yeah, I might go look here in a second while we're talking, just out of curiosity. Well, I had no idea. So that's another reason why I like to have these discussions.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you the truth. I had so forgotten about that whole episode. Probably 5 or 8 years ago at North Texas RPG Con, somebody approached me and wanted me to autograph a copy of Pool of Radiance. And I was like, well, I didn't have anything to do with this.
Oh, wow. You totally dumped it.
Showed me my name in the credits.
You're like,
said, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You're right. I had to think about it for a few minutes to remember to dredge up what I had done. All that work was being done right about the time when it was a very there was a lot of upheaval in my life at that time. I forget if it was right when I was getting married or right when my first child was born or what it was, but there were other bigger issues in my life
right
at the same time.
Yeah, see, I'm seeing it as this big holy grail moment, and for you is like, it's something I was doing at work while real life was happening. So you worked with Jim Ward, David, quote unquote, Zeb Cook, David Zeb Cook, Mike Bro. Now, Mike Bro is a name that I know the others. I don't want to accidentally diss Mike here. I'm trying to see what he worked on. Well, in addition to that, he edited some first edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons books. Okay. Mm-hmm. He co-designed Pool of Radiance. Left TSR in 1989. Okay. Oh, he had did some stuff in computer games, including the Red Faction games.
Went into computer games, and then the last time I saw Mike was also down at North Texas RPG.
North Texas,
probably 5-6 years ago, and he had been teaching somewhere in a computer design course, computer game design course for people who want to get into that industry.
Well, it's a trend that I see. A lot of RPG design veterans end up in computer games. Like, a lot of people don't even know that Jeff D was like an art director on some of the Ultimate stuff. Zeb Cook went on to work in computer games, and
Errol Otis did a lot of work in
Errol. Yeah. So it's I guess it's a natural progression because a lot of the thought of how you do a tabletop role playing game would translate to.
Jeff, right now at ZeniMax on Elder Scrolls Online, there's a ton of former TSR people. Jeff Grubb, Ed Stark, Bill Slavosek, Miranda Horner. And I'm sure I'm forgetting people. Yeah, there are a handful of computer game companies that realized, hey, these former TSR people are really good hires. So
it's almost like they know how to make games.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I see here now. I've had Zeb Cook. I've talked to him on the show. I've talked to him at North Texas. In fact, the first North Texas RPG Con I went to years ago, I almost took Zeb out with a, those big you put your baggage on them, those carts.
Oh yeah.
Like carry. Yeah, I was going around a corner and I just about took him out. And I was like, he was very nice about it, but I was like, how would I feel if, the first North Texas I went to, I took out, one of the best known figures in gaming that goes there. He's a nice guy. I like Zeb so much. He's just, everybody's friendly. I really can't sing the praises of North Texas enough. It's just very friendly. Everybody's having a good time. Nobody's up
really
on a pedestal.
It's a highlight of the year for me. I love it.
Yeah, me too. I try not to miss it. So now I see here that, you worked with Jim Ward more than once. And I know that, Jim passed within the past year or so. Was there anything that you wanted to say about Jim, working with him or anything?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, Jim was a good friend, and he was a wonderful boss. Well, he could be a wonderful boss.
Right.
He could be a very demanding boss as well. But that's part of being a boss. So, yeah. But Jim was. He had an attitude. I forget what his term was for all of us, but he used to refer to, his role as a manager. And this may well not have been original to Jim, but that, he considered himself to be a shit umbrella, and that it was his job to protect everyone under him from all the shit that was raining down from above him in the company. Right.
That's a good tip.
We could do our jobs, and he did that really well. And he took a lot of I don't want to say abuse, but he deflected a lot of shit from the rest of us. So
it's one thing, because growing up, I assumed TSR was this big magical wonderland, right? Of course, because I was like I was 12 when Marvel Superheroes came out, if that gives you any idea of, where I am in the timeline. Mm-hmm. So as far as I'm concerned, TSR is this magical wonderland, and then of course over the years, I'm a bit of an armchair historian when it comes to role-playing games. And, it was a company just like any other company dealing with the same stuff, than any other, the executives and the workers and the middle management caught in between and all that. So another thing that has absolutely blown me away about TSR is the amount of different things they tried, the different kinds of products they tried to get into and this and that. They didn't just hold on to D&D and say, this is our cushion and we're never, they tried a lot of different things before they went out of business. So,
in the early 80s, even before, and there's a lot of, apparently there are people now who have access to the company's financial records and, have a lot deeper insight into it than I had at the time, or any of us who were not part of the executive team at the time really had, as to exactly what happened financially in 1983 and 84. But in those early 80s, the company was very concerned about the fact that TSR was a one-trick pony. It had D&D, and if anything happened to the D&D market, that was it for TSR. There was a very it was kind of a company mission, right? That and this was not something closely held by the executive board. This part of it, they shared with everyone, right? That it was a company mission to try and diversify and get,
to be a games company, not a D&D company, right?
Get some protection from the fact that if D&D gets sick and dies, the whole body gets sick and dies.
Right.
And so, the Star Frontiers, Gangbusters, the Greenfield Needle Women, all that was, to try and get some insulation against.
Let's talk about it. I think what you're talking about, the Greenfield Needle Women, like they were doing almost like cross stitch patches.
Needle
there was
points.
A lot of different. yeah, needlepoint. There was a lot of stuff that TSR tried that I don't think people know about, that I think gives credit to what you're saying, that they were trying not to just be, D&D. Obviously that was their flagship product. Now, what year did you start at TSR?
I started in 1981, spring of 1981. I think it was March, or not January, May. I think it was May 4th of 1981.
And before that, you were a reporter. Is that right?
Newspaper reporter. Yep, in Peoria, Illinois.
And your first assignment was you were covering a murder. Is that right?
That wasn't my first assignment, but it was the first night I was put on the police beat. So, yeah. And
then you try. I'm going by your Wikipedia article, which I give it a big grain of salt. So please feel free to frantically correct any of this.
I mean, the last time I looked at it was a few years ago, but I think it was all pretty much corrected.
I love your car. You're trying to get a job at TSR, and your car broke down on 3 different occasions. Were you like, what's life trying to tell me here?
Yeah, that was trying, to say the least.
So it says you began now you were there because Gary Gygax didn't leave TSR until a few years later, right? Mm-hmm. So you were there.
He was still. This was before he went to California. He was still there in the building doing the day to day when I started there. Yeah.
So, and you left. You were there through the takeover by Wizards of the Coast, and then you left in 2011. So, from your standpoint as an employee, did you feel a big difference in TSR after, Gary left and Lorraine kind of took over? Was it, hey, I'm just putting out games? I mean, was it, and I'm not trying to get you anything uncomfortable if you don't want. I'm just curious. Yeah.
So those are complicated times.
Right.
There was, on the one hand, everyone had a lot of respect for Gary because he was, for his creativity, right? The guy was, he did what he did really well. But at the same time, as far as Gary and the two, Kevin and Brian Bloom running the company, there was a lot of unrest. there was a lot of feeling that these guys are amateurs. They don't know what they're doing.
Well, and to be fair, a lot of people give the Blooms crap, but TSR, I mean, they were the money behind TSR at the beginning. So, of course they're invested and want to have their say.
Right.
So anyway, moving on. All right.
Well, and the thing is, it was a very young company. Almost everybody working there, at least in the areas I interacted with, right, which was what was called R&D, right, design and editing, and the art department and the print production department. Everybody there was very young. There were probably only a handful of people who were even in their 30s. And the truth was, however much we felt like the people running the company were a bunch of amateurs, none of us knew what we were doing.
Right.
We were literally inventing an industry.
Well, you guys were holding on to a lightning bolt.
Who had published role-playing games before, because no one had published role-playing games before.
Yeah, Gary and others, even though Gary gets most of the credit, had captured lightning in a bottle and was trying to hold on, right? So,
But the case, to get back and actually answer your question, when at the point where Lorraine Williams took over the company and Gary was forced out and the Blooms sold out to Lorraine, the general feeling in the company was, this has got to be for the better, because if nothing had changed, in 6 months the company would just be gone.
Did it feel like that? And I don't mean this disrespect to Gary, but Lorraine was more of a business person. Did it feel like there was an adult in the room now?
Yeah.
Okay.
She had numerous. We didn't know all that much about her, but she had numerous company-wide meetings where she stood up and there's all kinds of things get thrown around. There's a lot of slander about Lorraine Williams, and there's certainly plenty of blame that can be placed on her.
I'm not saying she's perfect
of the company, but there's also a lot of good things that can be said about.
Well, most of the stuff that I saw that was like, I was like, hey, that's really impressive. TSR tried that, was under her reign or whatever. I was like, wow, she was trying to diversify the company, but I wasn't there. I know there's a lot of vilification of Lorraine Williams and the Blooms. When there's that much, I'm sure some of it's justified. But, people also forget, like from us, hey, it's our beloved hobby. So these are villains and heroes. They're just people trying to run a business. So, on some level. So, a lot of it gets over dramatized,
And I mean, one thing, again, a point about that time, one thing that I would say very much in Lorraine's defense is that she had these meetings, company-wide meetings, to talk to the employees about what was going on. And as far as I know, she never lied to us in those meetings. She never sugarcoated what was going on, right? When the company was in financial straits, she was very straight with everybody about this is the problem we are trying to fix, and here's how we're trying to fix it, and it's not going to be easy, and there's going to be a lot of pain. There are going to be more layoffs,
right?
But so, and that's certainly not true of a lot of executives at companies. They would,
no doubt,
sugarcoat things. And
well, I mean, Commodore is another company that I know a lot more about the rise and fall of. So like TSR, Commodore, a few other. Commodore actually had things where they got it documented where like they said, hey, if you guys do this for us, you'll all get a bonus. So the employees worked their butts off, hit the goals, and then like in a public meeting, like the executives came up with all this mental gymnastics on why they didn't achieve the bonus. And that's where you get into the executives are against the employees, right? Famously, Chris, actually, I'm not going to tell this story. It's a little bit too left field. But and I can't remember if it was related to me publicly or not, so I'm just going to kill that one. But there was a company that, I'm just going to kill it. So,
Lorraine was very supportive of the employees. She kind of had a little bit of a noblesse oblige attitude about it, But the practical effect was she took care of the employees very well. And
that's good.
When people had personal problems, when people had health problems, she was very understanding, and in many cases set things up so that TSR went out of its way to take care of employees who needed extra care. And that's just not.
And see, that's something you don't hear a lot. Thank you for sharing that. Not that I'm trying to defend Lorraine, but I like to get the full picture, not just Lorraine killed TSR, right? Lorraine shot Gary in the back. So, and I love John Peterson. I think he's the best game historian out there. His chapter is the ambush at Sheridan Springs, right? Because Gary did get ambushed,
Oh yeah.
So
there was definitely some dirty pool going.
Oh no, they maneuvered him out. So that happens in business. So business is warfare. A lot of people don't get that at a certain level. A lot. Okay, let me roll that back. A lot of people see business as warfare, right? I'm not saying business has to be warfare, but a lot of executives see it that way. It's a battlefield, and
and like I said, it's there was some dirty pool, there was underhanded tactics, but if the situation had not changed, TSR would have disappeared.
Was
and
going to go down.
Who knows what would have become of D&D at that point.
So you have a good perspective, because a lot of people I talk to were like, oh, I was a TSR for like 2 years or this or that. You were there under Gary, then under Lorraine, and then during the transition to Wizards of the Coast.
Mm-hmm.
So what was it like to transition over to Wizards of the Coast? Where it was everyone like, oh, thank goodness we get to keep our jobs, or like was
yes and no. You know, there was a lot of relief because everybody knew the company was drowning at that point. So yeah, there was a huge amount of relief that everyone had great respect for Peter Adkison and for a lot of the other management team at Wizards of the Coast. Everybody was very happy that the company was going to survive. But, there's also a certain sense of being the vanquished foe,
Especially by a younger upstart. Right?
Yes.
Because, Wizards of the Coast came along later.
The fact that TSR was in as much trouble as it was in was at least partly because of Wizards of the Coast, because Magic the Gathering siphoned so much of the hobby away from D&D.
Okay, so it's interesting that you brought that up, because that was one of the things I was going to ask you about. So I was there when Magic came along. You were there when Magic came along. Not everybody listening to this podcast was. It's hard to date the disruptiveness of Magic the Gathering. It exploded. Just went berserk, and fairly early on in the life cycle of Magic, I had friends trading unopened boxes of booster packs for cars and stuff like that. This wasn't 20 years later. This was fairly early on. So Magic exploded. Boom. I can remember playing Magic, because when you first started playing Magic, you anteed cards. Right in the rule book, it said ante up a card. We were anteing like, was it Lotus, Black Lotus, whatever these Lotus. Today, or like, here you go, I'll ante that. We didn't know.
Yeah, you could buy a house with an original.
Right, you buy a house one now. The point is, it exploded. And I know, I've had more than one game store tell me that Magic kept them in business.
Yep.
So like you said, it sucked a lot of air out of the room when it came to the gaming hobby. And there was a lot of crossover between tabletop RPG gamers and Magic. So that segues perfectly into, I was going to ask you, what was it like at TSR when you guys were watching Magic explode like a mushroom cloud on the horizon? Were you guys like, oh crap, or like, what was it like? But like privately, you're probably like, I love playing this game, but as a member of TSR, holy crap.
Yeah, on the one hand, it was like, oh, we're in a lot of trouble. This game is really. There were a lot of parallels. Outside TSR and inside TSR, parallels being drawn over the fact that, D&D invented a whole new genre of gaming. And now Magic was doing exactly the same thing. It was inventing a new type of game, and it was taking the gaming world by storm.
And it was obvious at the beginning this wasn't just a fad. This was a substantial disruption happening.
Yeah. So, and there were a lot of people playing Magic inside the halls of TSR, right? And,
the bosses walk by and everybody would hide their cards?
Yeah, there was a certain amount of, you're weeping every time you play a card because that you're contributing to your own demise.
To your own demise, but you just can't help it.
I love it so much.
It really was a good game. I've got to give Richard Garfield massive credit.
Oh, yeah. It's a brilliant game. I've never been much of a player of Magic because I have this weird attitude about card games. But that's me. That's my own personal hang up, right? I have played Magic. I thought it was perfectly good game, but card games just aren't my thing. So.
That's fair enough. Well, so this segues into another part of your TSR experience. Once again, you worked with Jim Ward, but also Dave Cook and Tim Brown on Spellfire, which was that not kind of TSR's response to Magic? It was like, hey, we've got to get a collectible card game out. So
absolutely, everybody was doing collectible card games.
Yeah, well, you had almost immediately. So you had World of Darkness put one out called Jihad that they ended up changing the name, I think, to Vampire or something. Spellfire came out. Legends of the Five, all these collectible card games exploded out there. So this is actually even more interesting to me now because you're just like, I'm not really into card games. So what was it like working on Spellfire? Were you coming up with game mechanics, or what was your role here with Spellfire?
What was going on at TSR at that time, because the company was looking, I think it was right about the time that Magic was introduced, or maybe even a little bit before. I don't remember what year. Anyway, Jim Ward and I, Lorraine took us out of the normal department, and we were given this huge office, all to ourselves, that was above the warehouse. It was 10 people could have had offices in this one office, this one big room that Jim and I shared. And we were put in charge of new products. We were supposed to just sit in that room for a year and come up with new ideas. And that's what we did. And
that sounds like an amazingly cool, there's pressure there, but that also sounds like a really cool job.
It was probably the best year I ever had at TSR. We got to just brainstorm and try things and play test, pull other people in for play testing, do tons of research.
Sounds kind of like a dream job in games to me.
It really was. It really was. And we came up with some of what I thought were fantastic ideas. Now, in the end, the company didn't pursue any of them, and it was toward the end of our year that Lorraine came to us and said, "You know what we really want? We want a game to compete with Magic the Gathering,"
which is a totally reasonable request at that point.
Yes, yeah, and so Jim kind of roughed out the basic idea of the game, and I went through it and did a lot of development, like the idea of arranging the cards in a triangle. That was one of my contributions, as opposed to just laying them out the way you do in Magic. But I honestly, at this point, I don't remember too much. I was not really involved in the design of specific cards. I was working on how the game overall is played.
You were at the 1,000-foot view. You weren't down at the individual. Yeah. So, actually, looking at this, Spellfire was the second CCG on the market. I didn't realize that it came out that quickly.
Yeah.
And then Jihad came out a couple months later, which was, I don't know why they called it Jihad. They changed it pretty quickly, I think, for political reasons. But that was the World of Darkness sort of vampire CCG. So, but and I didn't realize looking through this how many sets came out for Spellfire. It wasn't that they just threw it out there and then said, okay, well, they supported it for quite a while. There were a lot of sets that came out for it.
It made a lot of money for TSR for quite a while.
Do you ever get people coming up to you and talking about Spellfire or saying, hey, can you sign these cards?
I don't think I get associated with it too much anymore. I know that there is still a Spellfire community out there, but it's not something that I keep in very close contact with. There was a funny anecdote when I think the purchase by Wizards of the Coast was finalized at this point, and so Lorraine was out of the company. But it was when TSR was still in Lake Geneva, and Peter Adkison and other people from the Wizards of the Coast design team were coming out and just talking to us about how we do things, and trying to get a handle on the way we schedule, that kind of thing. Very much a production sort of
right, a boring business side of it. Yeah.
And Peter was looking at our production schedule, and he said, I must be misreading this, because I see here someone is assigned to, one person is assigned to design a new Spellfire expansion, and they have a week on the schedule.
You're like, nope, that's right.
How can that be? Is like when we do a Magic expansion at Wizards of the Coast, we have a whole team of people, and they work on it for 3 to 6 months, right? And I was like, no, that's right. We do that in a week. One person does that in a week. And Peter he turned and looked at, I forget the guy's name now, but he was the head of, he was in charge of the Magic designers.
A week.
He looked at him and he said, a week. And the guy just kind of shrugged and said, it's Spellfire.
So, I wonder if that production schedule was to try to stay ahead of Magic in terms of releases, like, beat them, get more out there, get more on the shelves. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, even from my novice ears, a week for an entire expansion sounds like a recipe for a nervous breakdown.
Yeah, that would have been a pretty grueling schedule. But,
it's Spellfire.
Yeah, I mean, that was Jim Ward. He talked, and this was not the first Spellfire expansion we had done. By the time we had put out 5 or 6, there was pretty much an established formula for how to do it. And, Jim talked to the designers who worked on it, and they all agreed, yeah, we could probably do that in about a week.
So, Wow, they didn't even pull a Scotty and inflate the number by 30% and then deliver in a week.
Yeah.
What good. Wow. Okay, so you started work with TSR in 81. WotC bought out TSR in 97, if I remember right.
Yep.
And then you were there to 2011. So you're basically a major veteran of both companies at this point. So
that came up in I did an interview like this, actually a couple of them, with Ben Riggs last week, and he brought up that same point. He was saying that I'm the only person I can think of who has had a longer run in the tabletop D&D industry was Kim Mohan, because Kim was at TSR when I started, and he was still at Wizards when I left. So although he retired a couple of years before I did, but then he kept doing freelance work, which is what I had been doing for the last 10 years anyway. So that has to count. So yeah, I would say certainly Kim was in the industry longer than I was, but he might be the only one.
So yeah, you were there because it's unusual when I talk to a TSR veteran or Wizards of the Coast for that long of a career, especially at both. So what was the bulk of your work? And I'm going to get to some of your, because obviously, Star Frontiers and Gangbusters and Marvel superheroes and stuff like that. Some of the things you're known for at TSR. But what was the bulk of your work? Like, what did you mainly do for Wizards of the Coast? What were you doing once it became Wizards of the Coast?
When I first came out, I was doing website stuff. I was running the website for Avalon Hill,
Now, when you say running it, were you like the webmaster? Or were you behind the scenes in the code?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I was essentially the editor in chief, is what it amounts to. I was in charge of the publishing schedule. I did a certain amount of web design, but very simple. Very simple. The website was all established, so I could do HTML code for individual articles and that kind of things. But I wasn't doing any structural stuff on the website. But yeah, I was the editor in chief for that. I did the, like I say, Avalon Hill, D&D Miniatures, the D&D Miniatures website, and I don't know, a bunch of stuff like that. I was on the web team, and then eventually, when during the 4th edition era, I had a short stint as the editor in chief of like Dragon Online and Dungeon Online, that kind of thing.
So you're doing more editing and article work than game design for Wizards of the Coast.
Yep.
So that let me bring that back to TSR now. So when you started with TSR, I believe you were a games editor.
Yep.
So what's the difference between an editor, a writer, and a designer? Like, is there one? Is it just like it's a title and name only, and you're writing games anyway? Or I mean, like,
at TSR, writer and designer were the same thing. There was somebody who wrote, an adventure or a game product. Then, originally, there was a department that sat between design and editing called development. And that was, the people in that department, there was like Evan Robinson and Paul Ritchie III and Kevin Hendricks. And their job was to look at what the designer had done and check it to make sure, is it using the rules of AD&D correctly? And are there gaps that need to be covered? That sort of thing. But the development department was wiped out like overnight by very shortly after I came to work at TSR, over what we referred to as trumped up charges of insubordination. There were.
Was that the module where there was like blowback from the executives because
no.
Okay.
That was a separate incident that happened a little bit later, although not very long. It was all kind of going on at the same time, but that one
was that Palace of the Silver Princess. That was the
big,
okay. Anyway, so so there was a different insubordination event.
Yes, yeah. What happened? If you want to hear the story, there was TSR was doing a board game, the Escape from New York board game. If you've ever run across that. Based on the movie Escape from New York.
At any point in that board game did you get to shoot an oval in a wall with bullets and then jump through it like Snake Plissken did?
Oh yeah.
That if you rolled a 6.
Yeah. No, what happened was a couple of the people who were supposed to work on that game, specifically Evan Robinson and Paul Ritchie III, they were not happy about being put on this board game, a very, like a family board game that was, aimed at 6 to 10-year-olds.
Wait a minute. Escape from New York was aimed at 6 to 10.
Well, probably 8 to 12-year-olds, not 6.
Okay.
But they were very upset about it, because they felt like, they had been hired to work on D&D, which at the time was considered very much an adult level game, right? A very smart game. And so they were giving some blowback about being put on Escape from New York. And that attitude made its way up the chain of command to the executives, and essentially, without this was a very, the executives handled it in pretty much the worst way it could have been handled, which was just to come down and say, well, if you guys aren't happy about working here, then you don't work here anymore. And they just, without any discussion, without any debate, they were just fired, right? It was essentially an act of terror by the executive board to get everyone else in R&D back in line. And and then at that point, it was like, well, there goes most of the development department. So the development department just doesn't exist anymore, and their work is now editorial work. So that's where all of that was leading to. So the designer writes the product, then it goes to an editor. The editor is in charge of, or is responsible for, everything you would normally expect from an editor, the copy editing type stuff, checking for typos and sentence structure, grammar, readability, all of that. But also, does it follow the rules of the game? Does it tell a coherent story? Are there gaps in the adventure? Are there gaps in the game design? Right? That was one of the things I really loved. I got to work very closely with Mark Akers on Gangbuster, with Doug Niles on Starfront, well, with a whole lot of people on Star Frontiers, Doug Niles on Nighthawks, the second game in that. And that was really my favorite part of the job, was analyzing the game design for flaws and weaknesses and gaps, and taking it back to the designer and saying, here's a problem we need to fix, right? So, and then it went into typesetting, and it came back, and we worked very closely on storyboarding and layout. The editing position at TSR was really expansive, which was a great situation to be in as somebody who loves game design and loves editing, because you got your fingers all over the product before it was done.
So you came in, speaking of game design and loving game design and all that. So I know that it sounded like before you came to TSR, you were into war games, and then I guess in college you got into D&D, and then got consumed with it. So before you went to TSR, I
had never heard of it before I got to college,
and then you got consumed with it. So funny how that happened to a lot of people. What's this? Okay, it's now taken over my life.
Yeah, you'd probably not be surprised at how many people at TSR in the R&D department had stories about nearly flunking out of various college courses
because of D&D.
They spent all their time playing D&D and drawing dungeons.
Oh yeah. Well, and then that experience led to work at TSR. So, I mean, I'm not against college. College is very important, but if you can parlay gaming into a lucrative career, then, do you really need college? I don't know. I'll leave that. I'll thumbtack that up because people have different opinions. So what, had you played any other game or role-playing games before you ended up at TSR?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So you weren't just D&D exclusive.
No. In the at college at Iowa State, there was a gaming club that met every Saturday afternoon, and we played all kinds of stuff. I mean, there was a lot of D&D, but I played Gamma World, I played RuneQuest, Starships and Spacemen, Traveler. We played a ton of Traveler, On Guard. Lots of war games, miniatures games. Yeah, we played all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, see, I didn't do the traditional college experience. I went to like night school. I was in the Air Force right out of high school. So I did like a lot of night school and CLEPs and stuff like that. But I would have loved to have that experience of the a game club on college. I probably would have ate that up. Okay, so you had a lot of exposure to different games before you came, and then you had a writing background. You were writing for a newspaper and et cetera. So, well, let's, just in the interest of not stealing too much of your time, we've already gone quite a while, but I I will never forgive myself if I don't talk a little bit about a couple of games that you worked on. One, obviously, I think a very important game in TSR history is Star Frontiers. Of course, you had Gamma World, which was kind of sci-fi, but it was also kind of post-apocalyptic sci-fi. Also linked to Metamorphosis Alpha, if I understand correctly. They shared the same setting, or not same setting, same universe, if you will. But Star Frontiers was TSR's space opera, essentially, right? Mm-hmm. So, is it fair? Is that fair to call it space opera? I guess. Yeah.
I mean, it was meant very specifically.
Space adventures.
Yeah, it was meant to compete with Traveler. So
right. I remember buying Star Frontiers and loving it, reading through it, loving it, playing it. I know a lot of people have a lot of fond memories for Star Frontiers. So when you edited Star Frontiers and Gangbusters, like what kind of feedback did you have? Like how much do you feel like that you kind of shaped what those games became as the editor?
I mean, a fair amount, but at the same time, I don't want to take anything away from the people who did the design work, right? Because the ideas were theirs, right? My role was more polishing those ideas, removing the rough edges. When the stuff comes from the designer, they're working under a deadline like everybody else, and it comes off of their lathe with a lot of burrs on it yet, and it needs to be smoothed out so that it's going to run the way. Although Star Frontiers is a unique case. I don't know if you've ever heard the story of the creation of Star Frontiers.
I feel like I remember, but the dates don't match up because Star Frontiers came out in 1982. I feel like the Star Frontiers genesis was like Gary took a couple of people to see Star Wars and they came out and said, we've got to have a space game. But I think I'm confusing two memories there. So yeah, you're shaking your head like, no, Shane, you're wrong. So yeah, tell me the story.
Well, so it was, there was a certain amount of unrest within the R&D department over the fact that designers could not get royalties on the stuff that they were doing for TSR, right? There was a feeling that, we are authors, we are in publishing, we should get royalties. Gary gets royalties on AD&D, Dave Arneson gets royalties on D&D. Why aren't we getting royalties on our design work?
And the executives, of course, were saying, well, you're work for hire. But you guys are saying that's BS, right? That's a similar argument that goes on in the comic book industry. They're like, hey, we're doing very creative things that's making a lot of money. Anyway, go on.
Well, and so, the executives kind of relented. They said, well, if you designed a game, right, Gary and Dave get royalties because I think Jim Ward got royalties on Gamma World. They said, if you designed a game, you would get royalties on it. But if you're just designing supplements for someone else's game, you don't get royalties. So Lawrence Schick and Zeb Cook said, okay, fine, that's fair. How about we design a science fiction game, and when we'll design it on our own time, so none of it, we're not collecting a salary for any of the work that we do, so there's no work for hire. If TSR decides to publish it, if it's good enough to publish, you pay us via royalties on it.
Yeah, I've never heard this. Right? Okay, that's interesting. Yeah.
So they designed a game called Alien Worlds. And it was very much a hard science fiction game, meant to compete head on with Traveler. But about the time that game was done, was ready for review by the company, a guy named Mike Gray had been hired by TSR. He came from Milton Bradley. And Mike's a wonderful guy. I became very good friends with Mike over the years. Unfortunately, I haven't seen him for a couple of years, but we played games together every Wednesday night for years. So I got to know Mike very well. But Mike's attitude or his reaction when he looked at Alien Worlds was, this is too complex. What we need is D&D in space. It needs to be a much simpler game that kids can play. And so suddenly all this work that Zeb and Lawrence did was essentially gone. It was just sort of wiped out. But
I mean, how did they feel about that? Do you remember?
Oh, they were furious. That's why Lawrence left the company.
Was over that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And he wound up suing TSR over it because over Star Frontiers and winning his lawsuit because there were enough ideas from Alien Worlds that carried over into Star Frontiers.
Well, they should have paid him for that, right? But I mean, I don't know how that all. I don't know.
Well,
he left.
The way it turned out was because by the time the decision was made that Alien Worlds was not the game the company wanted to publish, we were so close to the point where it had to go to a printer if it was going to come out on the schedule that was set for it. That the only way the new game could be created was essentially they just parsed the game out, right? It's like, Tom Moldvay, you're doing the combat rules. Harold Johnson, you're doing the spaceship.
So at this point, it's being done on company time. Is that because
it's being done on company time by people in the building who are all working independently?
But I mean, is that because TSR says, yes, we do want to publish this game? So now.
Yes, because they had already promised a science fiction game to distributors and retailers.
Okay.
So they had to have a science fiction game. They just decided they didn't want Alien Worlds.
Okay, so at this point, it's like royalties are going to be involved, but TSR is also dedicating resources. Is that right?
Well, no, but because they gave the chunks of the game to everybody in the design department except Lawrence and Zeb. Because if they'd been involved, they would have had to be paid royalties.
Oh, man, that's such an executive move.
Yes, they were very specifically cut out of the process. And that, I believe, was a big part of what Lawrence's lawsuit was about.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was how, but from my perspective, I'm the editor sitting at the center of the web. And I have, I have Tom Moldvay, or I have, Alan Hammock brings me a section of his rules. Not the whole thing he's supposed to write, just like, here's the first 5 pages, and slaps it down in my inbox, right? And I'm working on something else. And then half an hour later, Tom Moldvay comes in and says, where's that chunk of rules that Alan just wrote? And I say, it's in my inbox. And he looks at it, and he's like, oh, this isn't going to work with what I'm working on. So he takes it away to rework what Alan has done. And then Alan comes back and says, where's that stuff I dropped off? Right. I need to make some changes. And I'm like, Tom Moldvay has it. You need to go talk to Tom.
Wow.
And now the two of them are feuding because Tom is making changes to what Alan did. And Alan, I'm pulling their names out of the hat, right?
So are you drinking a lot of Pepto-Bismol during this process?
Troy Denning was the editor on the adventure part of the game, and I was the editor on the rules part of the game. And every night, Troy and I came in at 8 a.m. We worked steadily until about 8 p.m. Then we went out and we drank until the bars closed at 1.
Wow.
We would stumble back home, get about 6 hours of sleep, and stumble back into the office at 8 the next morning, sorely hungover, and just do it all again. And that was our
Star
life.
Frontiers.
Yes,
wow.
That was our life for about 3 months. And it was probably like that year I spent with Jim Ward doing blue sky projects was the best time I had at TSR.
Right, that was the worst.
Those 3 months on Star Frontiers were the worst time I had at TSR.
Well, I have to say, it resulted in what I feel was a good product. And
it took, for years, I hated Star Frontiers, and I wanted nothing to do with it. And it was only thanks to Doug Ray at North Texas RPG Con, who wanted to do an event that involved a Star Frontiers adventure, and he, tapped me to do it. And I was like, I would not do this for anyone else, Doug, but for you, I will do it. And so I pulled out Star Frontiers, and I went through it, and I put together an adventure, and I had a great time. And I pretty much, I made my peace with Star Frontiers at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I could see why you had, negative feelings towards it, just because, you were in the Baton Death March, while it was going on. But I thought it was a cool game. I was like, this is cool. Look at all this cool stuff. So
I've talked to lots of people who really loved Star Frontiers.
Yeah, so. I thought it hit that. And hindsight's 2020, but I think that, was it Mr. Gray? Was that his name? I think he was right to ratchet it back from the hard sci-fi of Traveler.
Yeah, I don't fault Mike for that decision. I think that was probably the right decision. The way Lawrence and Zeb was.
Yeah, I feel terrible about that. That's such a typical executive move to purposefully cut them out after, like, they were the genesis of it even. So I don't even, was Star Frontiers, was it a good seller? I can't remember. I'm sure I've looked this up before.
Yeah. I mean, it didn't sell D&D numbers, but it was very successful for quite a few years. I mean, I think I got to know, and TSR eventually hired several people from GDW. As I recall, I could be misremembering this, but that, GDW, people at GDW said, it definitely, Star Frontiers cut into our sales, noticeably.
Into Traveler.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because Traveler is hard sci-fi, and you think it would appeal to a different type of player.
Yeah. You except Traveler never had, at least in the early 80s, what GDW was publishing as adventures for Traveler, they had a terrific game, but they never seemed to be able to get a handle on how to put together a good adventure. So
fair enough. Just as a personal trivia for me, the first role-playing game I ever played was Traveler. Even before I ever played D&D, I knew about D&D, but I played Traveler with a buddy. One day I just, out of the blue, I like made up a game, like a board game or something that was like fantasy, drew it out on paper, and I took it over to my friend's house and said, hey, let's play this. And he's like, I'm going to teach you Traveler. And so we played Traveler. And we didn't play it anywhere near, I'm sure, how it was supposed to be played, but we had a great time. So,
Traveler's a hard game to get a handle on. If you're trying to learn it just by reading the books. Although I had an interesting experiment that quite a few years ago, 8 years ago or so, I had another gaming group. It was just myself and a couple of buddies. The group was never bigger than 4 people. But we focused on really early RPGs from the early 70s. We spent time on original D&D, Tunnels and Trolls, and some Traveler. And it was amazing to me, after having gone back and reread the original 3 little D&D booklets so we could play original D&D, and then reading the original 3 Traveler books, which came out only a few years later, but they are worlds apart in terms of the professionalism and the clarity of those books, right? I mean, to see how far the industry progressed in just a few years, in terms of putting together a coherent, useful product. because I mean the original 3 books of D&D are impenetrable.
No, there's I can't remember the name of the product, but somebody did a PDF and completely didn't change a single rule, but reorganized everything.
Oh yeah.
And people who use, I can't remember the name of it. The Save for Half podcast did a review of it.
There's a few of those. I mean, Swords and Wizardry is basically that. I think that's essentially what Black Hack is, or it could either Black Hack or White Hack. I don't one of the two of those.
Well, they say it makes it almost a different game because the rules are just like, it's not the rules themselves that were bad. It was the organization was crazy.
Oh yeah, you just couldn't understand what they were supposed to. There was the line that always stuck with me is in the description of the ability scores, and it says, characters with a high constitution can withstand adversity.
Yeah,
but there's absolutely no quantification of what that means. And so in our game, there was one guy who had rolled a really high constitution, and every time something bad happened,
he's like, "I can withstand adversity.
I have 16 constitution. I can withstand adversity."
Well, so this adversity is higher than your constitution. So down you go, Clarence. Okay, do you have time to spend a few minutes on Marvel superheroes? If not, sure. I completely understand. Okay, so while you were at TSR, some of the things you worked on were Star Frontiers, Gangbusters, World of Greyhawk Revision in 1983, The Top Secret Companion, which, Merle Rasmussen is usually at NTX, and he's a lot of fun to talk to. He'll run Top Secret in a tux. So, you also, you according to this, you edited half of the Book of Oriental Adventures. And you worked on a lot of other stuff. You co-wrote the Dragonlance novel, Wanderlust, which Dragonlance is huge for me. I'm a big Dragonlance fan. Is that the only, with as much writing and stuff, is that the only novel you've ever had published, or have you published anything else? Have you ever had the desire to write a novel in addition to that one?
Yeah, everybody dreams about it, but so my co-author on Wanderlust, Mary Kirchhoff, we were married at the time. And Mary wrote quite a few Dragonlance novels, and so I knew really well, and now having done half of one myself, what a painful and excruciating process that is. So I, like most writers, I love the idea of having written, but sitting down and actually doing the writing
is hard. Yeah, it's tough.
I would much rather write gaming, an adventure for D&D than try to put together a novel.
Well, if you're going to write a Dragonlance novel, one with a Kinder central to it is important. I like Kinder. A lot of people don't, but I think Kinder are great. Yeah, Kinder are a lot of fun. I'm a big Dragonlance fan. Let me amend that. I'm a big fan of the original setting. It's been changed many times, but the original world building and characters, I'm a big fan of. I mentioned Oriental Adventures. You've worked on a lot of the 3rd edition version of Monster Manual 2. You got a lot of stuff under your belt while you're at TSR. One of the big things for me, huge, was your Marvel Superheroes game. Now, that I was 12 years old when that came out, and I was a major comic book nerd, just as big of a comic book nerd as a role-playing nerd. So that's the perfect game for me. When I see that on the shelf, that yellow popped twice as well. So,
perfect game and the perfect age for it.
Yeah, it was written, I've read that you guys wrote it. The target market was so that a 10 to 12-year-old could pick it up immediately. So I think you nailed that. I think I was already playing D&D and stuff like that, so I don't think I necessarily needed that aspect of it to play, but it was very quick learning. It was just like, hey, boom, jump right in. The phase rip, colored chart has been adapted to many other games. Yeah. It's a very elegant, you were talking about elegant earlier, a very, very elegant game system.
It's really simple, and yet there's almost nothing it can't handle.
It's perfect for, it was a perfect fit for, at the time they called it the modern age of Marvel Comics. Now they call it the Bronze Age. It was a perfect fit for that type of comic book. Grim and Gritty was on the horizon and just starting to happen, but Grim and Gritty hadn't really exploded on the scene yet. We're still a year or two away from, Watchmen, Dark Knight Returns, and, The Punisher getting super, super popular and stuff like that. And there were other gritty things happening, but this was still pretty much, it's 1984, 4-color, bright, poppy, nobody dies comic books for the most part. And this game captured it very well. So one of my questions is, it says that I think Jeff Grubb designed it and you wrote it. Is that correct? Like, so what was because normally you're editing or something. So what was the division of duties there?
Yeah, we approached Marvel differently from the way we did most games, because it was part of it, a big part of it is that the game was put together on a somewhat tighter schedule than what we normally would have allotted to designing a whole.
Was that because Marvel wanted something out, or like what was the rush? Do you remember?
I honestly don't remember what the reason was. If it was just a scheduling problem that we couldn't get to it until a little bit later, in the process, or what. But it was a tight schedule, and so Jeff wanted, because he was creating a completely new system for this game, although it was based on something he had done in college, but it was still largely cutting a brand new game from whole cloth. So he wanted some relief from the time pressure of having to actually write polished prose as he was doing the game design. So we agreed that he could hand me whatever he had, right? As long as the design elements were solid, I would rewrite it in the voice of Spider-Man or whoever.
I was going to bring that. That was really smart to have it that, like, literally Spider-Man is telling you how the game works, or like on the magic section, like he's like, I'm going to hand it off to Doctor Strange now. And then Doctor Strange is like, here's how magic works, which was different from how most RPGs were written back then.
Yes. And that was Jeff's idea, right? To give it more personality. But I had consumed those, Spider-Man and Doctor Strange, frankly, were two of my favorite comic books.
I was going to ask, were you reading comic books at the time that you were writing for this?
Yes.
Okay, so you were a comic book.
Oddly enough, so when I was a kid, I devoured comic books, but I rarely bought comic books. I had my next door neighbor there were 3 kids next door, 2 girls and a boy, and I had an older brother who was about 4 years older than me. But Mike, the neighbor, he was 6 or 8 years older than me. And so he bought tons of comic books. And because he didn't have a younger brother of his own, he gave them to me. And so I constantly was inheriting all of Mike's comic books. And he was a big Spider-Man and Doctor Strange fan. And so I was a big Spider-Man and Doctor Strange fan
by default.
Yeah. Yes. But while we were even working on the game, while we had the licensing agreement with Marvel, one of the things we got from Marvel was every month a shipment of everything they had published that month. And so all these comic books would go into a box and it would just get circulated through the department. So, there are many stories about, like, bankers, being given a tour through the company when they're considering whether
they're reading comic books.
Right. Yeah. Should we, give TSR a new loan? Are they a solid enough company? Right. And they come walking through where all the work is supposed to be, being done, and it's new comic book day, and everybody is just sitting there reading comic books.
They're talking to the banker like, hey, can you stop blocking my light? I'm trying to see who the Hulk's going to punch next. Did you get to interact with anybody at Marvel directly, or was it all kind of through
I did not. I very seldom interacted with anyone at Marvel. Jeff did quite a bit. He got to be pretty good friends, I think.
Well, he ended up writing some comic books at some point.
Yeah, he did some writing for Marvel, and he got to know some of those people fairly well. But I never had really any. My paths did not cross with them. I think the illustrators did much more so, and the people designing things. But for the editing process, we were mostly just concerned with getting it into shape for the printer.
Well, I think you did a wonderful job on the writing.
I really enjoyed the time I spent on Marvel. Jeff and I both had even though it was a tight schedule, we both had a really good time working.
What were you involved with the advanced set at all, or just the basics?
No. I was moved on to other things when I was on a different product group entirely. The advanced set. When
the advanced set went out, I think that for the target audience and what you were trying to do, I think that the Marvel Superheroes basic set is one of the most dead on, well executed games. Like it was just perfect, right, for what you're trying to do. 10 to 12-year-olds.
It's a game that I don't. The only time I get to play Marvel Superheroes anymore is at North Texas RPG Con, where I have some friends who are big fans of it, and I like to stick around on Sunday afternoon, and very often we have a big Marvel Superheroes game.
And I'd love to do that.
I still love playing that game. I just think I'm very proud of the work we did on it, and it holds up so well, even in this age of the 21st century game design and all. I think Marvel Superheroes holds its ground really well.
Well, I've seen so the universal results table, which is the really well known, iconic in the true sense of the word. Iconic should mean when you see it, you immediately think of something else, right? We use iconic now to just mean, I don't know. It's in every other headline. The iconic this, the iconic that. Yeah. But iconic means, like, if you see the Golden Gate Bridge, you think of San Francisco. If you see Statue of Liberty, you think of New York City. It's iconic. And that universal results table, that's iconic, not just of, to me anyway, not just the Marvel Superheroes game, that color-coded red, yellow, green, white chart, but also that era of my life. This was the perfect game at the perfect time for me. But I've seen the universal results table in the game system pulled out. It's called phase rip, right? And I've seen it pulled out and put into other like hobby games, and it works really well. So Jeff designed a good system. There's a guy named Sean at North Texas that has a HeroClix style game run using the universal results table phase rip system, and it works really well. So,
it actually kicked off a whole phase of role-playing game design based on tables like that, right? When SPI did its James Bond game, they used a table like that to run the game. When Pace Setter split off from TSR and designed Chill and Star Ace in their games, they were all based on a universal table.
A table of results.
Because it's really simple and easy to use, and it's a lot more. It produces much more interesting results than a simple binary like D&D uses. Right, where you either got your number or you didn't, right? It's on off. You can have a whole range of results from that table, but it's still very fast and easy to use.
Well, I ran the Saturday night at the most recent North TX. It felt a little surreal because I was like, Steve Winter is here in the building somewhere, and I'm running Marvel Superheroes. So it was like reality was going to bend somehow. But I ran the introductory scenario from the yellow box basic set, and we all had a good time. It was 3 adults and 1 kid, and we all had a good time. And it's it's I don't know. This is really, we covered a lot of ground here. I really think this game deserves more discussion, but we've gone quite a while, and I want to be respectful of your time. So, just again, a very important game. So it's an honor and a pleasure for me to get to talk to you about all this other stuff, but definitely this game. I mean, I can remember my hands were shaking with this game. I was like, I can't believe that this exists. So excited, and it was perfect. Reading through it, the tone of it, it, like I said, it felt like the Marvel comics of the time. And I think that's really important for a product to match, because if a kid is reading comic books and he picks up that game, he wants to play something that feels like reading the comic books. He doesn't want to play something that it feels completely different, but it has superheroes stamped on top of it. Right. So like I said, I think this was, a bullseye. I think that you guys nailed it.
And I just don't think that any 12-year-old or any 30-year-old who still has a 12-year-old inside can play Marvel superheroes and not have fun.
Right. Because it's hard not to, right?
You're throwing people through walls.
Right.
Tearing out street lights and smashing them over people's heads.
Well, you can be the Thing. You get to yell, "It's clobbering time." I mean, somebody of obvious, the guy that was playing the Thing at the table, because we did Captain America. Yeah. We did the 4 basics.
Somebody can smash you through a building and you just get up and come right back.
That's right. Yeah. No, we had, and the guy he was playing the Thing, and he was yelling, "It's clobbering time," and all that. And it was perfect. So, really good time. So, I know you hear this stuff a lot, but at times, like when you're chugging Pepto-Bismol and getting drunk every night for 3 months, I know you're like, "Oh, this job's killing me." But, it's more than just a job. Every time I talk to a game designer that designed an important, I mean, you made it something that was important in people's lives. I can still remember reading through that book the first time, the rule book for Marvel superheroes, and it was perfect. So, good job.
Well, thanks.
From 12 or 13-year-old Shane, I can't remember. I think I was 12 when it came out. So, 1984. Yeah. So good job from a 12-year-old in the 80s.
Well, my work here is done.
Your work here is done. You made a product that satisfied a 12-year-old. So, no, but I still love looking through this stuff. I bought some more Marvel superhero stuff when I was at NTX just this past time. So, yeah, good. And that, I just can't get over the pop of the cover. It's yellow. It catches your attention. They're busting through the page. It's just everything about this product. Like I said, it just fires on all cylinders. I
don't remember who. It might have been. What was her last name? We had a graphic designer named Stephanie something or other. I don't remember who did the graphic design on that. The design on that cover, and chose yellow as that background color. But it was such a strange choice. But it works. To bring that word back up again, I mean, it's iconic. You see that yellow box, and that's Marvel Super.
That's Marvel Super, and it popped on the shelves. I mean, I can remember seeing it like Walden Books or whatever. May Walden Books forever rest in peace. That was always one of my favorite places to go on the wall. And it was just like, whoa, it was like shining off the shelves. So, all right, man, I got to wrap this up just to show respect to your time. Thank you so much. This has been so many good nuggets in here. Yeah, so many good nuggets in here. And, I look forward to seeing you again at North Texas. Do you go any other cons, or is that your main con?
I'll be at Gamehole Con in October. I had for several years been going to GaryCon. I didn't go this year. I haven't yet decided whether I'm going back next year. I'll have to, although I need to make that decision pretty soon, I think.
Well, now they have EGG Con. I think it's in its second or third year. Ernest Gary Gygax Con. I don't know much about it, but it seems to be another sort of OSR type con cranking up. So, all right, I got to do this, Steve. Oh, actually, I know you said you've been in retirement. You haven't been doing much, but is there anything you want to promote or talk about, right, that you want people to know about right now?
I mean, the only thing I'm really doing industry-wise at this point is I still write blogs for Kobold Press on the Kobold Press blog under Howling Tower, which used to be my personal blog. So if people want to, read my thoughts on various bits of game design, that's the place to find them now.
All right.
Maybe I'll start up the blog on my own when I wrap up the stuff for Kobold. I don't know. But I do have some exciting ideas for game projects that I want to write up. And I have tons of adventures that I've put together for conventions that I keep telling myself I need to just whip those into shape and put them on drive-through.
Yeah, well, if it's anything like the scenario we played in Shadowdark, I would definitely encourage you. That was a good scenario. So, okay, I do this thing. I always end my shows with a bad joke. The podcast isn't weekly. I used to do a weekly live radio show that would go out as a podcast. So I call it the bad joke of the week, even though the podcast isn't weekly anymore. It's just got a nice ring to it. So here we go. I'm sure you signed the waiver for mental damage, so you can't sue me for these bad jokes. But here we go. Here's the first one. And I picked this out for the Marvel Superheroes game. What do you call Iron Man when he doesn't have any clothes on?
I don't know. What do you call Iron Man when he doesn't have any clothes on?
Stark naked. Darn, you laughed. You're supposed to go, oh, that was, and grab your head.
Sorry.
Anguish. It's terrible. All right. And here's the second one. I've only got two this week. How does the Incredible Hulk look in a suit?
I don't know. How does the Incredible Hulk look in a suit?
Smashing. That's the correct response. All right. Well, Steve, thank you so much again. Thank you so much for your time. There was so many wonderful stories and stuff in here that I didn't expect. This has definitely been a good one for Inside Baseball, getting the inside stories on how it happened back in the day, you whippersnappers. So, all right. Well, thanks again. Any last remarks before I hit stop recording?
No, just I had a wonderful time. Thanks for inviting me on. Oh, I hope to see you next year in Dallas again.
Yeah, definitely. Everybody else, we will catch you next time on Shane Plays. Thanks so much for listening to Shane Plays Geek Talk. I certainly hope you enjoyed this journey into the things we love. For your convenience, show notes with helpful links for each episode can always be found at shaneplays.com. You can catch the podcast in several places, including on the blog at shaneplays.com, iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, Podbean, Amazon Music, Verbal, YouTube, and more. If you like what you hear and would like to support Shane Plays Geek Talk, you can do so for as little as $1 per episode on Patreon at patreon.com/ShanePlays. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time. Stay geeky, my friends.